Hello guys, and what's going on? Welcome back to my philosophical and allegorical breakdown of The Ghost in the Shell. And if you're enjoying the content that I'm providing, please subscribe and hit that little bell button so that you can never miss out on my content. Let's get right into it. Fairly close to the middle of the film, we get a great overview of a city flooded with advertisement and all of its inhabitants. So the same song that's been playing throughout the movie, which gives you a certain emotional response to it, and we see a silhouette bird like a plane flies over the city. So it kind of looks like a bird, but it's a plane that's flying over the city, reflecting Major's bird's eye view of the world. And we also see another mirrored reflection giving more credence to the metaphorical idea. So there's lots of mirrored reflections in this city view. The city looks dark and grim. There's trash floating, there's trash floating in the water, and the water is brown and filthy and polluted. It's very cluttered, and it's like a rat's nest in a way, you know. And the Major inquisitively looks at the broken buildings that are under construction and draws a parallel to herself and the city. So it's as if she is relating the city back to her own ontological issues. Is she just like one of these buildings, kind of like the Theseus idea of the ship? How long before the building is not the same building, right? And also we get the idea of creation and destruction going along with that. So this is as if to ponder the difference between her and the buildings, leading into the next few shots of the citizen zombies, which are moving very slowly in the city, so they really look like zombies, and a really good correspondence to mannequins at the same time, as the people or cyborgs are walking past. So it's giving us this whole duality notion again, between the people and between the mannequins, and are they really even people anymore? We get the idea that the whole city is lifeless, a zombie city. When we do cut back to the Major, and she is gazing out a window at the city, and it begins to rain, symbolically showing how she is crying on the inside, and how much sadness floods the crowded, despotic world, and how people are just completely numb to it. It shows the lack of individuality and morality, and the death of this society, pretty much. Only conformity and coercion walk the rugged streets of Newport City. To cut in with a quote here, the masses have never thirsted after truth. They turn aside from evidence that is not to their taste, preferring to deify error if error seduces them. Whoever can supply them with illusions is easily their master. Whoever attempts to destroy their illusions is always a victim. And the individual in a crowd is a grain of sand amid other grains of sand, which the wind stirs up at will. Gustave Le Bon. The perpetrator, or the antagonist, is a mysterious individual, and he is referred to as the puppet master, which is very symbolic if we understand the context of that term. And in this series, he, has the tools to stealthily manipulate geopolitics and intelligence, altering databases and memories of key persons for the benefit of selecting individuals and organizations affiliated with the ministry of this show, and is equipped with unparalleled computing and a cyber brain that has advanced hacking abilities. He is an AI, so this AI postulates that it has gained a ghost, and it is able to recognize his own existence without the need of others, even when he knows he was created by a program by humans. This falls into place with the mirror metaphor. They both are questioning what is called a self, or the so-called self. What is the individual? What is identity? So these ontological questions are being mirrored between the antagonist and the protagonist of the series, or of the film. but they both are at opposite ends of the spectrum, but ultimately meeting with the same questions. Which is why the puppet master says, "We resemble each other's essence, mirror images of one another's psyche." I believe it was the puppet master who stated the quote earlier in the diving scene, which would make sense considering the statement he says here. So that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, when the major dives into the water and you hear the strange voice, and it makes sense since he's a hacker and he has these, impressive hacking abilities or advanced hacking abilities. Bato and the Major have a quick conversation about whether the puppet master has a ghost and whether or not she was even real in the first place, again showing us her self-doubt and her possible Cotard delusion. Now, Cotard delusion is a rare mental illness in which the affected person holds the delusional belief that they are already dead and do not exist. Bato holds up the philosophy of René Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." But again, in this case, it would be "I compute, therefore I am," when approaching the AI situation, that is. So the problem with this is the suppositions underneath Descartes' statement, "I think, therefore I am." And the supposition is to be made clear here that the I is stating that you already are. And what I mean by that is, underneath the supposition of saying I, you have already assumed that you are an individual. And the rest of it, "I think, therefore I am." So the thinking and the am are both attributed to the I. So the important part to understand here is that the supposition of when you say I is that you've already assumed that you are an individual and that you exist and that there is meaning to your existence and that you have value, etc. So whenever you're dealing with philosophy, I recommend looking into the deeper components of presuppositional worldviews. But, also Descartes' idea is the ideology that lacks the sacred feminine aspect of the self, which is the spirit, compassion, and empathy or emotional sides. It leaves out feeling. It's just "I think, therefore I am." It doesn't say anything about feeling. And that's another thing that we could state as an argument here. But the best way to go about it is the transcendental argument of the presuppositions of I is already stating that you exist as a spirit and that you have an identity. Bato responds to her and says, "You got human brain cells, and you're treated like a human, aren't you?" If the second were true, then anything we treat like a human would be considered a human. And we know that a lot of people treat inanimate objects as humans, in emotional ways. So we tend to anthropomorphize everything from God to a rock. Transcendence through the singularity, where technology and biology merge, and the complete end is made of man as man. So if everything was human that we treated as a human, then it kind of devalues the idea of being a unique human. These conversations are dialectical approaches to the epistemological questions or the nature of knowledge. Dialectics is a method of philosophical argument that involves some sort of contradictory process between opposing sides. In what is perhaps the most classic version of dialectics, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, for instance, presented his philosophical arguments as a back-and-forth dialogue or debate, generally between the character of Socrates on one side and some person or group of people whom Socrates was talking to. This can also be connected back to the Hegelian dialectic, which is much more recent than Plato and Socrates, obviously. Hegelian's idea of dialectics is a thesis, antithesis, and then a synthesis. But George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was the pioneer of the Hegelian dialectic, which is the framework for guiding our thoughts and actions into conflicts that lead to predetermined solutions. So it's kind of the problem, reaction, solution idea. I create a problem, you react to it, and then I give you the solution, and now I'm the hero. Especially if you don't know that I created the problem. This is accomplished by manipulating consciousness into a circular pattern of thought and action which never leads to true solutions. These synthetic solutions to these conflicts can't be introduced unless those being manipulated take sides that will advance the predetermined agenda. We also see this in the dialectics of religion versus scientism. In a conversation between the Major and the Puppet Master, he says, "It can also be argued that DNA is nothing more than a program designed to preserve itself. Life has become more complex in the overwhelming sea of information, and life, when organized into species, relies upon genes to be its memory system. So man is an individual only because of his intangible memory, and the memory cannot be defined, but it defines mankind. The advent of computers and the subsequent accumulation of incalculable data has given rise to new systems of memory and thought parallel to your own. Humanity has underestimated the consequence of computerization." So this goes back to the idea of computing versus being an actual individual spirit, which is different. We have to understand that the causal cause is incomprehensible unity, and that it works mainly in the invisible realm. Now, as far as computation, it is working in the physical realm. It is not working at that level of causality. It's working in the realm of effects. But here we can see a Darwinian approach. Here we can see a social Darwinian approach to existence, and his lack of understanding of the metaphysical nature of reality, reducing all of man's meaning simply to a quantification of physical identity stored in the gene memory, failing to understand that the collective field is the mass storage for creation of the genes, meaning that consciousness is the programmer of the genes, which goes into epigenetics, which is beyond genetics. Epi means beyond, and in genes, is genetics. So epigenetics is a revolutionary idea and has been proven by modern science to be true, and that our consciousness is what writes and programs the genes. So in his own statement, he argues that DNA is nothing more than a program. Well, who's the programmer? Who programmed it? What programmed it? So he doesn't get to that, and that's where his limited idea is in his supposition here. The environment of consciousness governs the genetic code, which is known as epigenetics, like I said. It is interesting that he says DNA is nothing more than a program designed to preserve itself. He clearly has a sense of God that he believes to have has a creator. So my point here is that he clearly has a sense of a God that he believes is a creator, being that he uses the word programmed and designed the DNA coding. And you can use that in any way you want. So his supposition that life is merely about survival is incorrect. It is also about qualitative growth that leads to progress and movement towards a higher function of balance. And why I say that is because, yes, survival is a crucial component to life itself, but you cannot negate all the beautiful experiences and companionship, beautiful experiences with people and the environment that you engage with. You cannot just say that that's all there is to life, because some people don't have the ability to procreate. And does that mean they have no meaning in life? Well, no, it doesn't. They still have a beautiful life and many different experiences that they can find value in. And yes, some people's lives are very rough and difficult, extremely horrific, but in my point of view, it's better to live a bad life than to not live at all. So when I say that he is incorrect in his premise here, it is that he solely thinks that everything is about procreation. And it's not all just about procreation. To correct myself there, I mean, you can say that it's all about procreation, but that doesn't mean it's true. And it kind of does a humongous dishonor to people who cannot procreate and their beautiful life experiences, which is not to say that procreation is not a beautiful gift from the divine intelligence of nature, or God, or however you want to put it. That's up to you. But I also want to say here that I'm not here to convince you of any of these things. I'm just giving you my own point of view on these philosophical topics and how I have understood this film. And I've been watching this film for a long, long time and going over it in my head over and over and over to try to understand the philosophy. This is also not to say that you might not have a different point of view about the overall goal and conclusion of this film. There are many positive things going on in this film, but I do feel that the main point to hammer in here is the idea of transhumanism. And I also find it very interesting that you never hear the word consciousness spoken. It's all about social Darwinism and survival of the fittest or natural selection, etc., which through modern science has now been disproven. And I will be talking about that in the next part. But with all that being said, I'm going to end this part, and I look forward to seeing you guys and giving you the rest of the film. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.